Munich, May 31st, 2025. The Allianz Arena is shaking. Inter Milan has just been gutted open like a fish on a kitchen counter, and a 19-year-old kid from Angers is standing in the middle of the pitch with his shirt half untucked, looking around like he genuinely cannot remember how he got here. He has just scored in the Champions League final. Not a tap-in, a proper goal. And then he assisted another. And then he scored a second one. And the whole time his face is doing this strange thing. Not celebration, not joy, more like quiet confusion. Like a kid who walked into the wrong classroom and accidentally aced the exam. That kid is Désiré Doué. And the reason his face looks like that isn't humility, and it isn't shyness. It's something stranger. It's that he genuinely doesn't seem to know yet what he is. He's playing a version of football that nobody asked him to play, that no coach drew on a whiteboard, that doesn't fit any of the boxes scouts use to describe attacking midfielders, wingers, second strikers, false nines, inside forwards, all the labels that have been recycled for 20 years. He's doing something that doesn't have a name yet. And the most unsettling part, for defenders, for analysts, for the people who write about football for a living, is that he might not even realize he's doing it. Let me try to explain what I mean, because if you only watch the highlights, you'll think he's just another technical French kid with quick feet. There are dozens of those. France produces them like a factory line. You've seen Coman, Dembele, Mbappe, Cherki, Olise, beautiful technicians, each one of them. Doué looks like part of that family at first glance. Same body type, same explosive first step, same low center of gravity, same kind of dribble where the ball seems velcroed to his boot. If you stop there, you'd say, nice player, fits the mold, nothing revolutionary. But here's where it gets weird. Watch him for a full 90 minutes, not the edited 5-minute compilation, the whole match, and you start noticing something that doesn't belong. He moves into spaces that don't exist on a tactical board. He receives the ball in positions where, technically, he shouldn't be. He shows up between the lines, then drifts to the touchline. Then suddenly he's in the box. Then he's dropping to pick up a pass from his own center back, all within 90 seconds. And he's not doing it because some coach told him to. He's doing it because he's reading the game like a chess player who's already 5 moves ahead. Except he's 19 and probably doesn't even realize he's calculating. Most young attackers, when they get the ball in a tight spot, do one of two things. They either try to dribble out of it, flashy, ego-driven, often loses possession, or they panic and pass it backwards. Doué does this third thing, and it's the third thing that's so unusual. He receives the ball, he absorbs the pressure for 1 heartbeat longer than feels safe, and then he releases it into a space that nobody else on the pitch had even noticed yet, including his own teammates. Half the time you see his strike partner sprinting onto a pass that arrived 2 beats before he was looking for it. This is the thing that's hard to coach. You can teach a kid to dribble. You can teach a kid to pass. You cannot teach a kid to see the game in this way. Either the wiring is there or it isn't. And in his case, the wiring isn't just there. It's overclocked. Rewind. Angers, France. A small city, not particularly famous for producing footballers. 2 boys, twins, born in June 2005. Désiré and Guela. From the very beginning, they were inseparable. And from the very beginning, they were obsessed with the ball. The kind of obsession parents try to redirect because they're worried it'll break a window. The Doué family was a football family. Their father played semi-professionally in the Ivorian League, and so the obsession was tolerated, encouraged, fed. 2 boys in the same hallway, kicking a soft ball off the walls, dribbling around the furniture, inventing imaginary defenders out of chairs. By age 6, they were enrolled at the local club. By age 10, scouts from Rennes had already noticed something. Désiré joined the Rennes Academy and started climbing the ladder at the kind of speed that makes coaches whisper to each other in the parking lot after training. By 15, he was playing with kids 3 years older and outperforming them. By 16, he was training with the first team. At 17, he made his Ligue 1 debut, 17 years old, in the senior team of a club that had just qualified for European football, and he wasn't there to learn, he was there to start. Now, here's the part that the highlight reels don't show you. The early years at Rennes were not a fairy tale. He was talented, yes, spectacular, sometimes, but he was also inconsistent in the way that all teenagers are inconsistent. He'd have a match where he'd torch a Champions League defender in a friendly, and then 3 days later he'd disappear for 90 minutes against a mid-table side. He'd get into shooting positions and rush the shot. He'd try the ambitious pass when the simple one was right there. He'd drift out of games. He was, in other words, a kid. A very talented kid, but still a kid. And this is the part of his story that I find most interesting, because it tells you something about how he thinks. Most prodigies, when they hit that wall, the wall of inconsistency, the wall of, you have to learn to do the boring things well, most prodigies either double down on the flashy stuff and never quite figure it out, or they get coached into a more conservative version of themselves and lose what made them special. Doué did neither. He did this third thing. He started studying. You hear stories from people who worked with him at Rennes. He'd ask for video of his own matches and watch them at home. Not the goals and the dribbles, but the moments where he made the wrong decision. He'd freeze the frame and ask his coaches, "What should I have done here?" He'd take notes. He'd memorize the positioning of opposing midfielders. He started understanding football not as a sequence of one-on-one duels, but as a flowing pattern of triangles and spaces. He was, at 16, doing the kind of analytical work that most professionals don't do until they're 28 and worried about their next contract. The result was that, by his second season at Rennes, the inconsistency was gone. Not reduced. Gone. Every match, he was a threat. Every match, he was making the right decision more often than not. And the coaches who'd been frustrated with him a year earlier were now saying things to each other like, "This kid is going to leave us, and we need to figure out how to get the most out of him before he does." He left in the summer of 2024. Paris Saint-Germain paid around €50 million for him. 50 million for a 19-year-old who had played 1.5 full seasons in Ligue 1. That sounds, on paper, like a panic buy from a billionaire club throwing money at potential. It wasn't. PSG had been watching him for years. They had a model, a probability distribution basically, that suggested he would become a top 5 attacking midfielder in the world within 3 seasons. 50 million for that outcome is, by modern football economics, almost a steal. They didn't think they were buying a prodigy. They thought they were buying an inevitability. Now, the move to PSG could have ruined him. We've seen it 100 times. Young French talent moves to Paris. The spotlight is too hot. The locker room is too political. The manager rotates him. His confidence drops. And 3 years later, he's on loan to Marseille pretending everything is fine. The graveyard of French wonder kids who couldn't survive the Parc des Princes is a long one. But by the time Doué arrived, PSG had also been changing. The Galacticos era was over. The Messi, Neymar, Mbappé project had been quietly dismantled, brick by brick. Luis Enrique, the Spanish coach who had taken charge in 2023, had spent his first season ripping out the foundations and replacing Winidiga with something different. He didn't want stars. He wanted a system. He wanted players who would run for each other, press for each other, swap positions fluidly, attack in waves. He wanted, basically, a younger and more aggressive version of the Barcelona he had once coached. And he was looking for the kind of player who could be the brain of that system. Doué walked into the building exactly at the moment Enrique was searching for that brain. The first half of his debut season at PSG was a feeling-out period. He came off the bench a lot. He played in cup games. He didn't start in the biggest matches, some fans grumbled. 50 million for this, he's barely playing. But Enrique was doing something specific. He was letting Doué watch, letting him absorb the rhythms, letting him understand how the senior players moved, where the gaps appeared in Ligue 1 defenses, what the manager wanted from each position. And then, gradually, he started giving him minutes. And then starts. And then key starts. And by the time the Champions League knockout rounds came around, Doué wasn't a squad option anymore. He was a starter. What he did in those knockout rounds is, honestly, hard to describe without sounding hyperbolic. He destroyed Liverpool's midfield. He pulled Aston Villa apart over 2 legs. He dictated the tempo against Arsenal in the semi-final. And in the final, against an Inter side that had been the most solid defensive team in Europe all season, He did something that I want you to think about for a second. He didn't beat them with speed. He didn't beat them with strength. He beat them with anticipation. Every time Inter set up their defensive shape, Doué was already moving to the space where the next attack would happen. Not where the ball was, where the ball was going to be. 2 seconds in the future. You watch the goals back and they almost look easy. That's the trick. That's what great players do. They make it look easy because they've already done the hard part. The reading, the moving, the positioning, before the ball even arrives. By the time you see them on camera, the work is done. The finish is just the punctuation. And here's what I keep coming back to. He's 19. He's not supposed to be doing this yet. The history of football is full of teenagers who could dribble, teenagers who could score, teenagers who had pace and confidence and the kind of self-belief that comes with not yet knowing what failure feels like, but the kind of structural intelligence that Doué showed in that final, the ability to see the game 2 seconds ahead, to manipulate defensive shapes by his own positioning, to make teammates better simply by being in the right place. That is a 30-year-old's game. That is the kind of football brain that usually shows up at the end of a career, not at the beginning. This is why I started by saying he's rewriting the game without realizing it. Because the thing he's doing, and I think this is the part that's getting missed in the coverage, isn't just being a great young player. He's quietly making a case for a position that doesn't really exist in modern football yet. He's not a winger. He's not a 10. He's not a false 9. He's something else. He's a positional manipulator, a player whose primary value isn't the goals or the assists or the dribbles, but the way his constant movement reshapes the geometry of the entire attack. If you want to understand what I'm talking about, look at how teams defend against him versus how they think they're defending against him. Coaches set up their backline assuming he's a wide attacker, so they shade their fullback wider. They ask their winger to track him deep, and then in the actual match, he never stays wide. He drifts inside. He pulls the fullback with him. Suddenly the wing is empty, and a PSG fullback is running into space that didn't exist 5 seconds ago. The goal that follows might be scored by someone else entirely, but the goal happened because Doué was there, because his presence bent the field. This is what Messi used to do at his peak, by the way. Not the same player, not the same skill set, but the same kind of effect. The positioning that warps the entire defensive structure, the gravity that pulls defenders out of shape. And the difference is that Messi was 25 when he started doing it consistently. Doué is 19, so the obvious question is, what happens next? And this is where I want to be careful, because the temptation with a player like this is to start projecting forward and predicting greatness. And football is a sport where the cemetery of next big things is enormous. He could get injured. He could lose his hunger. He could get coached into a worse version of himself. The Ballon d'Or talk that started after the final could go to his head. All of those things have happened to other prodigies. There's no rule that says they can't happen to him. But here's the thing. Watch his interviews. Watch the way he talks about the game. Watch the way he describes that Champions League final. He doesn't talk about himself. He doesn't talk about the goals. He talks about specific moments where his teammates made him look better than he was. He talks about a pass that Vitinha played that he says was the best ball of his life. He talks about how the manager prepared them for the way Inter were going to defend the half spaces. He talks about football like a coach. He talks about it like someone who is genuinely, weirdly, more interested in the puzzle than in his own performance. That, more than the goals, more than the assists, more than the highlights, is the thing that makes me think he's actually going to keep getting better. Because the players who plateau are the ones who fall in love with what they've already achieved. The players who keep climbing are the ones who fall in love with the problem. And Doué, from everything I've seen, has fallen in love with the problem. There's a moment in one of his post-final interviews that I keep going back to. A French reporter asks him what he was thinking after the second goal, and he pauses, and then he says something like, "I was thinking that we still had 30 minutes left and Inter were going to come at us, and I needed to find a way to drag their right back 10 meters further forward so we could counter into that space." That's what he was thinking. Not about the goal, not about the trophy, about the next 30 minutes of tactical chess. At 19 years old, in the biggest match of his life, 4 minutes after scoring in a Champions League final. I don't know what he's going to be in 10 years. Nobody does. But I know what he is right now. And what he is right now is the kind of player who shows up once a generation, not because of his feet, because of his brain, because of the way he sees the spaces that don't exist yet, and moves into them before anyone else has noticed they're forming. And that's why I think the next 2 years are going to be fascinating to watch. Because every defender in Europe is now going to be specifically prepared to stop him. Every analyst is going to be feeding hours of his footage into models trying to predict his movements. Every coach who plays against PSG is going to have a plan for him. And the question isn't whether he can keep doing what he's doing now. The question is what he evolves into when the rest of the game catches up. My honest guess? For whatever it's worth, and I'd love to hear what you think, drop it in the comments. Because I have a feeling the people watching this video are exactly the kind of football fans who notice the same things I do, is that he's not going to evolve into a more conservative version of himself the way most attackers do under pressure. He's going to evolve into something even stranger. Because the kid who studies his own mistakes at 16, who watches video at home for fun, who talks about tactical geometry in post-match interviews after winning the biggest trophy in club football, that kid is going to find a new wrinkle. He's going to invent something we haven't seen yet. He already half-invented it in Munich. The reason it's hard to write about him is that the language doesn't exist yet. We don't have a word for what he is. We're using old words, winger, 10, attacking midfielder, and they don't fit. In 5 years, we might have a new word for it. We might call it the Doué role, or we might just call it modern attacking play, because by then half the top teams in Europe will be trying to find their own version of him. Either way, the game is going to bend around what he's doing, and most people watching it happen in real time won't even register it. They'll just notice that football looks a little different, that attacks come from places they didn't used to come from, that the defensive structures that worked 5 years ago suddenly stop working, and by the time anyone names the shift, it'll already be the new normal. That's how it usually happens, when the game gets rewritten. Not in a press conference. Not in a tactics book. In a stadium in Munich, on a Saturday night in May, with a 19-year-old kid standing on the pitch with his shirt half untucked, looking around like he genuinely cannot remember how he got here, looking around like he hasn't quite realized, yet, what he just did. Looking around like the rest of the world is about to catch up to a thought he had 3 years ago. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing about him. Not the goals, not the assists, not the dribbles. The fact that he hasn't realized yet. Because the moment he does, the moment he understands what he's actually doing to the game, that's the moment everything changes for real. Keep your eyes on him. You don't get to watch this kind of player arrive very often.